Hi there, and welcome to the Intangify podcast. My name is Matthew Asbell, and I'm your host, and my guest today is Alicia Nagel. Alicia and I are going to have a conversation about a really fun topic called being brand stuck. Hey, Alicia, welcome.
Thank you.
So glad you could be here today. And I think we have to let people know what we mean by being brand stuck.
Well, I love this name because it's evocative and nobody likes to feel stuck. And this whole idea came up when you and I were talking about how heartbreaking it is for some entrepreneurs or business people when they feel like their first pick for a name to trademark it is taken and they feel brand stuck.
That does happen, pretty frequently. And I think, both you and I kind of approach it differently, but have answers of how do you get from being brand stuck to being brand sticky.
Yes, we want them to come up with a name with confidence and be able to own it in a way that they can be remembered. And we have good news for those who might feel brand stuck. Not all hope is lost.
My good news is don't give up. You don't have to give up just because it feels for the moment like you're brand stuck.
I agree. And we're going to talk a little bit about like the legal ways to be creative with that, shall I say? And also the ways to actually get creative and riff on a name and a tagline and to come up with alternate ideas that might have the same concepts, but aren't taken.
But we're not going to really talk about the legal ways a lot because you don't want to hear me talk about the legal ways. We need to hear from Alicia because this is what Alicia does. What Alicia does all day is she helps brainstorm and come up with names for brands. She develops logos and helps develop logos that are sticky and help people to remember and catch the essence and the emotion of what the brand is. And she serves as a fractional CMO for some companies. And then she does these really great education courses, one of which I was attending just prior to this session.
Thank you. Yeah, those are all totally my jam. I consider myself a brand strategist and a marketing consultant. And I feel that with that comes a responsibility. I don't just design, I need to create something that's persuasive and tells a story. Because design is not art. The whole thing is the difference between art and design is design has it has like a mission, it has a message that it's supposed to be communicating. And if it doesn't, then you're just kind of making art, which is not as helpful for a business.
Yeah, so here I have to disagree with you because I think you're suggesting that art could not or does not have a communicative function or does not persuade.
Art is often something that the artist wants you to feel. It's a cry out this way, right? And if you don't get it, there's art critics and books and lots of people to explain it to you, and the artist will explain it to you. But if it's aesthetically beautiful and you don't get it, it's still a successful piece of art, probably. Whereas if a logo is trying to communicate something outward and nobody gets it, I don't care how beautiful it is. That's not a successful logo. It needs to authentically represent the business, set them apart from the competition, give a hint about what it might be like to work with them. And in fact, sometimes designs can be incredibly not aesthetically inspiring, but they can be very effective. I call those hardworking designs. They're not necessarily the prettiest, but they get the job done. And that's the point of business, right? We're not in hobby, we're in business.
I actually love that answer because it sort of makes it sound like art is more mysterious. Read into, try to understand what they're getting at. Whereas you shouldn't have to try to understand to get at the design and the branding. It should be readily apparent to you. Though that's a problem in my business, in the world of trademarks, but we don't have to talk about that now.
We were talking earlier about people remember stories and things that inspire emotion in them a lot more readily than descriptive facts. And I love the way this is something that I use in marketing to make my messaging persuasive, and you use as a lawyer to help your clients be more risk adverse. Is that the right phrase? By straddling the spectrum of distinctiveness to be more distinctive and less descriptive. In the marketing world, study after study shows that as consumers, as shoppers, we make the decision to buy something with our emotions, our gut. We do one of those, ooh, I want it. And you already decide in your heart that you're going to buy the thing. And then your brain looks for tangible like facts to back up the decision that you've already made in your heart. And if you can like justify it with yourself, then you're willing to part with your money and make the purchase. And so from a marketing standpoint, a lot of times businesses, they're really excited about how they make something and what it is. And they forget to talk about why it matters. And if you ignore that, you're missing that whole first bit, that hook, the excitement, the reason that people even look for the bullet points in the first place. Because at the end of the day, we're not like as humans, we don't love bullet points. That's a reason I like to say that's why they call it his story, history. They don't call it his bullet points. History is about storytelling. We remember stories.
So we're talking about being brand stuck. So how do people get brand stuck? What are the circumstances in which people get brand stuck? Because you mentioned one, which is, hey, I can't think of a new brand name. Every name I pick, someone else has. Can you think of other examples of when someone might be brand stuck?
Sometimes their business evolves over time. I've not infrequently come across people who they've named their business something that is tied to a region or something about what they do specifically. And, people start a company and it's very innocent. They're like, I do a thing. So I'm going to call my company, I do a thing in this place. Well, sometimes they start to do more than one thing, or sometimes they open more than one location and they kind of like have clipped their wings from the beginning. And sometimes it has bad effects, especially if you're regionally based and people are searching on Google Maps for you. They're not going to hire you if you're doing the thing in the wrong place.
You're right. I see it all the time. I see businesses that come to me with their idea for the name, and it often is, the topic, what it is they do, and the place where they do it. And you have to be thinking about that, going, well, do you really want to limit yourself that way? To our point about the difference between art and design, where the design intention should be hopefully something you can read into, you can understand, it shouldn't beat you over the head. At least I think it shouldn't beat you over the head with what the product is, because the product itself usually is not the thing that separates you from your competition. I think you might have something to say about that. So I'm going to shut up a second.
No, no, I love it. And I think that you're onto something, especially when you're starting a business, like saying what you do can be very important. Because if you name your business, I don't know, Widginig, and nobody knows what that means, you need a tagline or like some sort of a design that explains that you're a widget that is, fun to play with. I don't know. I'm just making this up. I think that the name is not where to put that. It can be text underneath your logo until you train people that this is what you do. It could be a tagline. It could be in your marketing or your design. But if you name your business that and you decide to start making pies in addition to your fidget spinners, you're in trouble, right? It clips your wings. So yeah, I think the more that you can, and this is where I mentioned the spectrum of distinctiveness, which I know is like a lawyer term, and you probably don't want to spend much time talking about it, but I think it dovetails so nicely into encouraging people to think about the bigger idea of what they do. The more that you can paint a picture of the rosy future that you offer your customer and instead of telling them how you're going to do it, the more you don't clip your wings. For example, one of my clients, she owns a day spa in San Francisco, and her like passion behind it is she wants to help people get their mind and their body in alignment so that they can relieve stress. And she also does business coaching on the side. And she also does TMJ massage herself. Well, all these things have a through line that she just wants to help people be free from their stress. And so recently I advised her to pursue that as like her website and everything, to be free with her, which is still in process. But the more that you can take a step back from what you do and think about, why do you do what you do? What's the intangible benefit? What's the emotional thing that's driving people to do business with you? And turns out it's probably helping people. Because I think a lot of business owners, they go into business because they think they can make a difference.
First of all, I wanted to say that, Woodjinig, don't know how to spell it, but Woodjinig, once I figure out how to spell it, right, it could be a very valuable trademark if you were to, on that spectrum you were referring to, because it is so far removed from what the product is. So if you're willing to invest the time in teaching people to know that Woodjinig is good for ice cream sodas and day spa services, then it could be a very valuable trademark. So from my perspective as a lawyer, right, we like names like that. We don't like the names that are like, I got this great one for you for legal services. Lawyer. That's horrible. Right? Lawyer, because that doesn't distinguish me from anybody else who practices law. You don't know anything about what you get from when you come to work with me to engage me as your lawyer. I'm just yet another lawyer.
I feel like the legal community is a hard one to stand out because there's so much pressure to combine everyone's last name or your last name.
It's hard to stand out with the name. I mean, the name is hard to make you stand out, right? I can think you can stand out other ways. And this is not about marketing legal services now, so we'll change gears a little bit. But something else you said that I thought was really resonating for me, and I think will resonate with our listeners, is that the brand is not what the product is. The brand is the mission. The brand is the objective, the mission, what you stand for. So you start a company, you do this proposal, you have your marketing plan, your business plan. You start with you know what it is you intend, like what do you care about, what's your mission, what are you trying to accomplish. um and I think that you're trying to carry that down into, okay, now how do I get my materials to reflect that aspect.
Right? How about your name, your logo, your website? Better paint a vivid picture of it. Even in utilitarian industries where it seems like everybody is competing on price or who picks up the phone the fastest or who's at the top of Google, more and more people are being discerning consumers. And I think they're looking for something, they're looking for a feeling, right? Say you're a plumber. I feel like people want plumbers to be fast. They want it to do it right the first time. They want them to be in their area. It seems like a very utilitarian industry. However, if you're not presenting yourself in a way that makes you seem trustworthy, I don't care if you pick up the phone fast and you're just down the street from me. I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to let you in my home if you're a plumber and I don't trust you. So I really encourage my clients to dig deep on what is the emotion that people are hoping that you instill in them that gives them the confidence to do business with you? And then everything can stem from there.
I like that a lot. So coming back to our topic of being brand stuck, we have the new business that feels like, hey, there's nothing that I want as a name that's available for me. And that's one flavor of being brand stuck. In my practice, right, there are other flavors of it. There are where you've already encountered somebody else who's using the same name, or they're suing you or blocking you some way. And there are a lot of people, a lot of my small business clients will come to me when they see something, when that happens to them. Let's say they filed their own trademark application, they get blocked based on someone's prior registration. They will stop there. They'll be like, "Oh, okay, I got to come up with a whole new name," or they'll do a search and they find something and they assume based on the search that they did when they found someone using that name that means they can't. There's a sort of a perception of being brand stuck when you might not be. You just possibly need the right strategic partner, whether it's an Alicia or it's a Matthew or it's someone else.
It's just a good lesson that when we're trying to do something ourselves and we feel like we get stuck, that's a great time to bring in a professional or even just to have a conversation to see what's possible. As I know from helping my clients with namings, a lot of times if there's something similar, but it's in a different industry or it's in a different region entirely, sometimes there's some wiggle room there. And it's just a matter of consulting with a lawyer such as yourself, or even would you ever recommend reaching out to the company and asking them permission, or is that like a no?
No, I did it today.
Do they usually is there some money that's exchanged or like a contract or anything, or how does that usually go?
Not necessarily, but there are risks in doing it. We have all sorts of avenues to overcome that type of refusal when you get it or when you anticipate it. It happens all the time in terms of we work with the owner because the owner doesn't perceive that there's a real problem and we're able to work out a deal, or we make certain changes, or we be persuasive as to why we're different. Right. So all different ways that we can deal with that sort of thing.
So, another thing that I find makes people feel like their brand's stuck is sometimes they have what they perceive to be 2 different businesses, and they don't see how they relate, and they're worried about paying for double the websites, double the URLs, double the logos, double the everything. And many times in my career, I've really worked with an owner and helped them figure out how the two relate to each other. so that there is a like a parent landing page or a parent name that is often the emotional benefit or the intangible benefit or some sort of like higher ethos as to why the business owner is driven to do these two things, because it's the same person that's doing it, so there's probably something related. And then from that main landing page, people can choose their path, either the one or the other.
Yeah, so you're kind of working backwards. You started earlier with the concept of right. Let's start with a brand that is the mission, that is all encompassing. But so often the clients have already come to you with the established brand that was not.
I usually don't, especially if they're already established or even if they've been in business for a little bit, I encourage them not to close down one or the other or have one consume the other because they've built up something that's known as brand equity, a little bit of a reputation, goodwill, and like a whole look and feel that is tied to that brand that a lot of times if you just pull the rug out from your customers, they think that something's changing, new management, new ownership. Why is this different? I was happy with it before. And there's really not a need to do that if you can just have a parent, an underlying like quiet parent brand that can tie them together. You can also slowly train people over time. Like you can have a main logo that you're going to have. They could be together, and then slowly it's the main logo with just the name of the other company or formally this or a partner of, and then you just slowly atrophy that over time. That can be another strategy.
Yeah, and so those kinds of things also happen in context of the legal clientele when we're dealing with trademarks. How do we gravitate? How do we change? How much time do we have to do it? Because if you're working with another party that's objecting, maybe you have some period of time in which you have
Two different parties. Yeah, that's a whole other flavor of challenge.
the way you were describing that to me sounded like something that I learned in your class, which I vehemently disagreed with. But I think I vehemently disagreed with because of the language. So I want to ask you, you used this phrase. You said rebranding is a myth. Is that what you're talking about?
What I mean when I say rebranding is a myth is that brands, they're not created, they're discovered. Whether or not you have a logo, you already have a brand as a business owner or a consultant, even a freelancer, even a human that like goes to work every day for somebody else. Your brand is why you do what you do, how you position yourself within the competitors in the marketplace, your unique selling proposition, anything about how you do business or go about things that is not monetarily driven. Why do you do a podcast? Why do you decide to be an approachable lawyer instead of a stuffy one? Why are you on your own instead of a huge firm? These things are all like what makes a company or a brand or a leader like who they are. So I see a brand as like an identity and how it fits within the larger competitive ecosystem. And also a brand, especially if it's a business, like I said, we're not in hobby, we're in business. It exists for a reason, a very important reason. It exists to serve a target audience. And so the relationship between the brand and the target audience is also part of that identity of the brand. And so these things are all discovered. In fact, my brand strategy process, most of it I call archaeology because I really want to bring home the idea that we're sort of looking for artifacts and clues about your brand because it already exists. And we're looking for insights in those and learning about the brand. Like, why do you do what you do? What do you stand for? A lot of times, companies or business owners don't really know. And so, archaeology is about discovering the nuggets, the interesting things, the things that are telling us about the culture that we're studying. And then the last part of my brand strategy process I call alchemy because we're taking those elements, those nuggets, those important pieces, and we're putting them together and combining them to try to come up with a really captivating story, a logo that's going to just nail it, a name that says way more than the single word that it makes up. The whole goal is to put them together to create brand gold, thus alchemy, haha. And so in that way, I feel like rebranding is a myth because rebranding is kind of saying who you are doesn't matter. It's like, no, we're just going to wipe the slate clean and say you're something else. You can change the logo, you can do stuff like that, but who the company is and the brand is at its core is going to be consistent. And in fact, I don't ever recommend like laying dynamite to a logo. Like you should probably do a logo refresh or an evolution or something, because otherwise you're throwing away all that brand equity and that trust and the consistency that you've built up over time with your audience. They're going to be thrown for a loop as to why you just got rid of it, you know? So that's what I mean when I say rebranding is a myth.
So that all makes a lot of sense, and I can agree with your descriptions, and I love the characterization of archaeology and alchemy and creating brand golds. Rebranding is a myth. That phrase on its own really throws me as a trademark lawyer, throws me for a loop, because we have clients who are every day who are requiring and demanding and forcing other people to rebrand, and we have clients who are being forced or being told to rebrand, and that rebrand is throwing dynamite on the logo. But what it is it's saying, hey, you do need to reinvent yourself, because the self that you've been portraying is stepping on my coattails, right? You're on my yard.
Well, I think it's the same person, it's the same company. They're going to be producing the same product and doing the same thing with the same employees, but their name needs to change. And unfortunately, when they pick a new name, they have to take that brand and associate it with a different name and a different logo, which eventually, that'll happen. Like you or I could move to a different city and eventually people would get to know us. And our brand, our personality, who we are is the same. We're just somewhere else and we're just re-educating them. Or say you change your name. I don't know. Some people get married and change their names or they change their first name. um, you're the same person. You're just sort of, it's just a little bit of an uphill battle to retrain everybody and to regain their trust and make sure they understand that you're the same entity.
The product or the service doesn't change, and the way in which it's delivered for the most part, or the the meaning behind it, and the style in which you approach it, because of who you are, doesn't change. So even if you're in a situation where someone is raising this objection and you have to change your name, that's not really rebranding, because the brand already existed. It's renaming the brand in order to bring out some other aspect or the same aspect without offending this other party.
Yeah. And I guess if you're forced to change your name or your logo or your look and feel, that's different than choosing to rebrand. I come across people who are leading a business and I don't know if they just feel stagnant or what it is, but they want to rebrand. They want to change their logo. I have to talk them out of it, even though like I would love to design a new logo for them. But I'm like, let's talk about this. Tell me about why you want to rebrand. And usually it's something else completely. Like they just want a new website or they want to communicate that they're modern now. And so we take their logo from God only knows how long, 1985, and we just reimagine it. An example of that is I did just that. The example that's coming to mind, Hawaii Island Adult Care in Hawaii had a really old logo from the 80s or 90s that was really detailed and the font and everything just like looked dated. And it was a certain kind of a flower that has a ton of filaments that are very delicate and it's impossible to embroidery or silk screen. It's just a nightmare. And the whole thing, while the concept behind it is lovely because the plant has local significance to the Hawaiian culture, it was not really helping them look modern. And if it's adult care, you want to drop off your elderly auntie or uncle and feel like these people are going to take care of them. They're not going to, give them some yarn to play with. They're going to have like a Wi-Fi and they have like medical facilities and stuff just in case. And so the trust and the perceived modernity were really important. And so I took the flower that was the core essence of this, the story behind it, and so we still had that flower in the logo, but it looks completely different. It looks way more modern. And so in that way, they were able to like evolve their brand image without having to reinvent themselves and without, you know, undermining the trust that they built up with these families over the years.
So you actually talked about that logo and showed it in your free class. Where did they go to take your class?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I have an introductory class to branding that I call Who Gives a Brand? Mostly because a lot of people don't understand why they need it, what it is, or why they should give a crap about it. And so that's why I called it that. And you can sign up and access it for free on my website, which is my name, alicianagel.com, ALICIANAGEL.com.
So when you talk about that in your class, the thing that occurred to me that's interesting, and you kind of you paid lip service to. You said, "Oh, like, hey, I got this old logo, I've got this flower. This is how it looked, and now I had to make it modern. So here's this modern version of it." What I didn't quite know is how. How did you figure out how to change the flower to achieve the goal of the modernity, the goals you wanted to set? That's the mystery.
Oh, okay. I love it. So almost all of the answers to what seem like to many is, unsolvable quandaries are actually already out there in the world. I've been called a brand therapist before because I really love to dig deep and ask questions of my clients because often the solution is in their brain. We just need to tease it out and then piece it together. So throughout the brand strategy process, I discovered that the largest um, group of people who tend to be using this facility were Japanese descent and, of course, much older. In that culture, there is this existence of like a family crest. I think to this day, they still, when you sign a document, there's often a stamp that is the family crest or that has some sort of design in it that includes the family name. It's often circular or like all contained in one thing. And so the new logo sort of echoes that look and feel. And so it feels old world, it feels honored. And it's a little almost like a woodblock print aesthetic to it. And the stamps are of that look and feel. And then also the flower that's depicted in it is called the lehua blossom. And it's a tree in Hawaii that's one of the first plants to grow in lava covered soil. So it is unafraid of difficult circumstances and it breaks up the lava rock and puts down roots no matter what and blossoms and flourishes. And so it's associated with rebirth and strength of spirit. And so the lehua blossom was maintained in it. And they also, I think I did a version of it that said since 1976 or whenever they started, because while we wanted it to look modern, we also wanted these people who were pillars in the community to feel like this wasn't just someone new that just like showed up on the island and was going to give them a widgie wig to play with for the day. We wanted them to know that they were seen, heard, the company had roots there too.
You started earlier saying about how you were trying to make sure the new version of the logo would convey modernity, but you ended up picking something that, to some degree, was a crest, similar to crests. Look, using wood blocks has old concepts into it that are conveyed, and I think you kind of already answered in your just now in terms of why that would be a desirable in this particular case. You're sort of showing modernity and establishment at the same time, and recognizing the tradition of the consumers who go there. I think
There's two very important audiences that we need to appeal to. The first, believe it or not, is not the people who are entering into the care. It's their adult children because they're the ones that's usually driving the decision to do this. They go to work during the day and come home and auntie has left the stove on or like whatever it is that they're like finally like I can't like I someone needs to be here with them and I can't afford that. So there's this awesome place where they can go hang out with the other elders in the community and they can hang out and I can just get them when I get off of work. And so this younger generation, they tend to be Gen X and they are, they want to. The whole thing is like safety and they want to know that there's medical people on staff and that they can like text them or maybe, access their information online. The younger generations have a certain aesthetic that they've gotten used to. And a sans serif font, which means a font that like, for example, doesn't have like the feet on it. I don't know how to explain it. It tends to feel more modern and efficient. And so we use that in the logo. The old one from 1976 has very fat, juicy, rounded serifs on it, but you don't ever see that font anymore. Just the font itself looks dated. Anyways, so we were appealing to both the older generation and the adult children of them.
you also brought us full circle because you talked about this distinction earlier between art and design, and you talked about how the art may be sort of more mysterious, maybe it has a reason or it's trying to communicate something, but the artists might be trying to communicate but not necessarily, or shouldn't necessarily be able to get it so easily, or maybe you have to go to a critic or whatever. And then we talked about that as in a contrast to design, where we had a goal of conveying something and ineffective if it doesn't convey that somehow. And yet, as you talked about this design, like as you talked about the elements of this design, you talked about things that there's no way a person looking that, like me, certainly, is going to realize. This flower grows in lava,
Lehua blossom is very well known amongst people who have lived in Hawaii for a while. I'm not joshing you.
Do people see that logo and go, "Oh, Lahua blossom, that grows in lava. This is a place for people to be really resilient."
Honestly, they do. The Lehua blossom is amongst people who live in Hawaii and have been there for a long time. It's known. They put it in leis, and you see it in designs and stuff, like aloha shirts and stuff like that fairly frequently. And if they don't get it, it still echoes the crest of a family seal. And even if you don't know anything about that, the circular shape and the crest nature of it, it's something that we see as like a seal of approval or uh guarantee. Or I think that the flower even echoes a little bit of like a thistle from England and the Scotland era family crest and stuff like that. So there's enough of a connotation. The Japanese aren't the only culture to adopt like a seal for their family, and woodblock, ironically, it's such a handmade like thing, but it lends itself very well to be adapted over to like a vector style that's minimalistic. So I think that we're accomplishing a lot with very little with the logo.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I just it's just there was so much of it that I was lost on. It was lost on me because I don't know about Lahua blossoms, but nonetheless, I hope that this podcast makes it into the hands of your clients in Hawaii so that they know they were being talked about. So where do we go from here? What else do we want to tell people about what to do when your brand's stuck?
Yeah. So another thing that people could do is they could hire a professional to help them walk them through the brainstorming process. It's one of the things that I do with my clients if they need it. There's a process where we start off with obvious exercises, and then we get more esoteric and weird as we go along because sometimes the best names are completely non sequitur or they seem so at the time. There's also words like I call them Franken words where you take two things and put them together. Sometimes if you think that your the word that you fell in love with that you want for your business and it's a noun, how do we get that noun? Maybe there's a verb that leads to that noun, which can be a more appropriate name and more defensible because it's not taken. So I'll lead them through this process, and it often results in not one name but a bunch of them, which is necessary because there's a lot of trademarks out there. And if I do know that the business is interested in pursuing a trademark, sometimes we'll involve somebody like yourself, send you 20 possible names, and you can tell us like this is pretty risky or this one ain't nobody got this one. Maybe this would be a really safe one. And then the client can factor that into their final decision. And it's good to do that early before they fall in love with something.
In putting music into film. If you have a film and your theme song that you're going to put in this place, like you might take a song that you know and put it there. And if you do, there's this great risk that you or the person you present it to temporarily fall in love with it. And then they have to have that song. They have to pay through the nose to get the license to that song because now it's like I can't hear it without that song. I can't watch it without that song. In the context of music for film, it's called demo love.
Oh, I love that. I'm adopting that. One of my clients, he sells different kinds of wood cladding for like walls or like interior, outerior, exterior. There's like all different kinds of wood, right? One of his most important target audiences is interior designers. Well, these days, interior designers, especially if they're high end for high end clients, they'll do like a digital mock up of this space and put like fake furniture and stuff like that in it. And sometimes they'll put in a texture. And so I encouraged him to not an insignificant investment, but he says that it's worked well to create seamless patterns of all of the wood cladding offered in his catalog so that the interior designer can drop it right in their mock-ups for the clients. And what happens is the client just falls in love with it and they don't even need to like pitch their client on options. They just buy that one. So that works pretty well, at least in that regard, yeah. I also did, now that really early in my career, I did a sample voiceover read for a radio commercial for a client as like I was if I was a teenage valley girl. I was really young. I think I was like 23, and so it wasn't that much of a stretch. They couldn't find someone that they liked better, and so they had to the agency I worked for had to bring me into the sound booth, and I was on the radio in the commercial because the client couldn't they fall in love with the ridiculousness of my Valley Girl impersonation, which I don't think I could do anymore, but
But But that's awesome. And I think it illustrates the point because when people think to come to you, when people think to come to me, at what stage they're in, right, sometimes dictates the avenues we go down. They come with a predisposition or a commitment to something, and they want you to make it so, or build all the materials around it, right? You make the logo that matches this name, whatever it's going to be, versus they come very early on with, okay, I'm just trying to come up with, this is my concept. These are the things I'm trying to illustrate. This is what my mission is, who I am, right? The things you work on with them. And then you have options, and then you can explore, okay, which of these options are available? Which of these options do you like better? And then arrive at something. You have to catch the person before they fall in love.
Hopefully you do. Otherwise, they get brand stuck, and then we have to, pivot and come up with other ideas.
Yeah, but then they shouldn't perceive that their brand's stuck in that moment, right? They feel if they can feel brand stuck, it's like writer's block. You have writer's block, eventually you won't have writer's block, right? There might be a way around it.
Time, people, being flexible, being willing to see what's not there.
Yeah, we do a lot of things with brands and trademarks, particularly in different countries. And in certain countries, it's quite common to sort of try and try again and then try again. And by like the fourth time, it finally goes through. Like China, that like it's very commonly, okay, you've locked this time, but now, okay, I've done this, and this, and now, okay, that's going to go away. And by the time I've got my third filing, I've got it. I just got to keep doing it over time. It's just persistence.
That's interesting. And I remember you saying something about sometimes it just depends on who you get at the USPTO office, who that reviews your file and what they think is defensible or not, or like makes sense or not. It's really interesting.
Not only what's discretionary to that particular person, it's also how deeply entrenched they are. Because some of them they issue the refusal because they think they have to, but they're going to get rid of they're going to they're going to withdraw it as soon as you argue the first thing. They just felt like they had to make the refusal. Others were like, no, I'm not letting this through. And so you have to kind of know who you're dealing with and what their position is. And there are strategies that we have for those sorts of things too. From the outside perspective, right, it's all the same. You're like, oh, I can't get it.
You just feed the dollar bill in and you hope the Coke comes out that you push the button for, but there's a whole ecosystem in there.
So I'm going to go super meta on you because, here we are recording a podcast, and so we're talking about Alicia Nagel and what she does, as a marketer, as a brander, right, as a logo designer. And I mean, I don't know if you made an emotional appeal. I think your emotional appeal was your comedy and your fun phrases and things that were catchy. But throughout our discussion, you helped support logically why it makes sense to go and work with someone like you to try to figure out, well, gee, what would happen? I mean, I want to like I don't have my own logo, but I want to go and work with you and have you help me figure out because I struggle with all these different aspects of who I am and who I hope that others will perceive me to be that I wish I could convey, and I probably could if I talked to you, right? And you supported that throughout the discussion, so I really appreciated that.
Thanks. Yeah. It's interesting for those very reasons that you just mentioned. I offer something that I call a brand roadmap, which is a 2-hour deep dive intensive where I put my thinking is thinking cap on and I go full brand therapist on you and I get the information and we have the discussion that I need to give you the insights that build that brand gold. I do the interview and then I do a little obviously thinking and some market research and I produce an executive level brief because business owners are busy. They're not going to read like a document. And so I really try hard to distill it into bullet points that have a lot of meaning in them. So it usually ranges between, 5 to 7 pages. And the idea is this is the lens through which we are evaluating all of our steps. We look at your website through it to make sure that it's asserting your uniqueness in an authentic way that your customer gives a crap about and differentiates you from your competition. You use it to inspire a logo design, use it to write blog posts, to choose platforms that you're active on. You can drop it into Chat GPT or your favorite AI tool and have it do copywriting or evaluate blog posts on your behalf to make sure that it's speaking to your target audiences. And if you decide to hire like a third party professional that is remotely in your industry, like maybe a PR person or a web developer or a videographer to create a video that is about your business, you can get them up to speed immediately because it's all the stuff that they need to create a persuasive marketing piece for you and that is buried in your brain as a business owner and you don't know it's there. And so I pull it out and this way it's just like roadmap for you or anybody. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it.
That sounds like something we should be talking about after this. You brought up AI, you brought up Chat GPT. If I wanted to come up with names for my my new business and I knew more or less something that I wanted to convey, right? I can go to thesaurus.com or I could, throw them into an AI platform and have the platform come up with some creative ideas for me. Um, why do you recommend or not recommend doing something like that as opposed to or as a supplement to working with someone like you?
I mean, I think it's a no-brainer. I don't see why you wouldn't use it as a collaboration tool to help you think of things that you might not have. As we all know, anybody who's using AI, it's only as good as you force it to be and make it. So it'd probably be good to train it on your business ahead of time. You don't want it to come up with a stupid name if your business, you know, it's really important for you to impart trust and to look like you have all your ducks in a row, stuff like that. So if you had this brand roadmap, you could upload it to ChatGPT or something like that. And then you could engage it in some naming brainstorming. I think where the rubber really hits the road is in the critical evaluation of the stuff that it comes up with. It's got to feel right when you say it. It can't be something that stumbles over the tongue. You have to ideally be able to spell it if you're an average person. And if it sounds like something that is negative or has a bad connotation or a swear word or something like that, as a human, you have to be able to like piece that together and not use it. You have to be able to make the judgment that that's too long or that's too complicated or that's too short or whatever it is. And those are things that while chat can produce options for you, it's not so great at being critical in those ways. But I think that it's a great collaboration, like brainstorming tool. Why not put it to use?
So right at the top of this recording, before we turned the recording on, we were talking about brand stuck and brand sticky, and we came up with brand struck. And Alicia heard that and said, Yeah, I really do like it. I really do like it. But, I think maybe people wouldn't be able to pronounce it so well. Or, when they try to say brand struck, or maybe they wouldn't hear the R in struck. Or maybe it would be like I was whacking them over the head with the brand, and maybe that wouldn't be so good.
Instead of saying, I like that one, I had a whole explanation for you. Yeah, we talked about go from brand stuck to brand struck, which is a little it's just one letter. I love the concept of it, but I thought brand sticky might be more sticky.
Just to tie it in one last time as we close out, I want to say that this program, this podcast is about intangible aspects of business, and one of the really most valuable intangible aspects of a business is its brand, the brand that it already has. If you listen to Alicia, it already has, but you might need to do some archaeology to dig it up, and you might need to do some alchemy to create brand gold. So really, really glad to have Alicia here. Thank you very much for all of your great thoughts. And I know we're going to have several more conversations in the future. So
My sincere pleasure, Matt. Thanks so much for having me and for being an amazing host. That was so fun.
thanks very much.